Well, welcome back to Wealth Strategies Unleashed. I'm Robert Gilliland with Concenture Wealth Management, and today I have with us
Mike Alexander, Chief Investment Officer.
Hey, thank you all for joining us, and please make sure you like and subscribe as we kind of get started. You know, Mike, what I thought that we would talk about today, you know, what are some of the critical, we'll call it 5 or 6 most critical mistakes people make when it comes to managing their money?
You know, Robert, it's a great question, and I know that there are a lot of mistakes that people can make. But I would say, first and foremost, a lot of times what people tend to do is they just tend to forget about setting up an emergency fund, just to handle some of the, you know, in case you have something happen in your life. Could be the loss of a job, could be the loss of a spouse, could be a change in job, just a variety of different things that can happen that can really trip up a lot of people on their way to retirement, if you will, and just not having that emergency fund set up.
You know, let me ask you a question, because we've had a lot of conversations with clients about setting up that emergency fund, and I've had several who have said, "Oh, but that's okay. I've got credit cards. I've got a large credit line. I've got a home equity line." Is it as important to have that cash set off onto the side, or just have access to that capital?
I think one thing that someone would want to think about is if you begin to start having to access credit cards, a lot of times, you know, the average credit card interest might be in excess of 20%.
Right.
And so if you find yourself kind of in a hole for a little while, that hole can be dug really, really deep, really quickly. So I think for most people, the best thing to do is to actually have that sitting in cash. And by the way, if you've got it sitting in cash today, you might be getting 4.5%, 5% in interest on the cash while you wait. So, you know, you're not really being punished for keeping that emergency balance on the sideline. And I think everybody needs to just make sure that they review it. One of the things that I think we've seen over the last year or so, as inflation rates have risen, is that, you know, the cost of meeting just, you know, your regular living expenses might be a little bit higher than what you're accustomed to. And so again, you know, we typically would recommend having 6 months worth of living expenses set aside on the sideline.
I agree. I think depending on job security, 3's a minimum, right?
Absolutely.
3's a minimum. And so, you know, one mistake I think people make, and it's very easy to do, is that they end up spending more than what they make. That's pretty much a given where that is. And it's all about being able to have some sort of pleasure or enjoyment today, and not really thinking about what the real cost of that is.
Yeah, it's really easy to do, Robert. I mean, if you think about it, every time you turn on the television, or you open a magazine, or you look out there, you can always see what somebody has or what they're doing. You can see how much, you know, with social media, you can see what people are doing in terms of vacations and all of these various things, and it's very, very easy to outspend what you're actually bringing in, and it's not uncommon. It's also one of the things that, you know, leads people to put that excess money on their credit card, just feeling like, hey, you know what, I can pay this off and I don't really need to think about it too much. The cost of doing some of those things can really be excessive when you start factoring in interest. So again, it's very, very easy to do that, and I think, you know, people just have to be very vigilant in terms of watching that spending as it relates to how much they're bringing in.
And I think kind of to go along with that is a mistake that people make, is that they don't treat themselves like a bill, right? Because if you treat yourself like a bill, and virtually every single one of our clients who are financially secure, they've always treated themselves like a bill. Every time a paycheck came in, they paid themselves. Now, luckily we have a little bit of that with regard to 401ks. Yeah. Right? We get that kind of forced savings. But the people who are truly successful, every paycheck, a dollar amount goes in to pay that down. And so a mistake people make is not treating themselves just like a bill. And there really is no option. I need to save $1,000, $2,000, $500. I need to save that much every single paycheck or every single month. That goes to help fund the emergency fund. That goes to get invested. That goes to fund your IRA or Roth IRA, all the while paying into their 401k. And I think those two kind of go together. So what would be another mistake? What would you say?
a lot of times people think that markets are always going to go up. And in many respects, I'm sure that is a determining factor in the way that they spend money as well. And so one of the things I think that any investor wants to think about, or maybe they don't want to think about it, but they should be thinking about it, is what do I do in periods when markets go down? Sometimes you have to adjust spending. Again, this goes back to your previous point in terms of treating yourself as if you were a bill and paying yourself. But markets don't always go up. Trees don't always grow to the sky. And I think if you find yourself in a situation where markets are correcting, you might have to make some adjustments. Again, that's one of the reasons why you have that emergency fund that we talked about, is so that you don't have to be a forced seller in an environment where everyone else is selling. You want to when other people are selling, you want to be a buyer. And so having the emergency fund, not outspending your means, all of those things I think play a factor in that.
Well, I think the reason why people think that it always goes up is because they're always comparing versus an index, especially in rising markets, right? And that the problem with doing that is your portfolio is not the S&P 500. Your portfolio is not you pick the index, right? Your portfolio, if it's managed the right way, will have some fixed income, will have these other types of investments. And so you're automatically not going. So in fact, we've recently had some conversations with clients who said, what's going on? Why is the NASDAQ's up 30%? Why is my portfolio only up 10, right? Or why is my portfolio only up 8? Well, once you walk through and explain it, well, it's because we don't own the Magnificent Seven, the NVIDIAs, the Intels, the Microsofts, and Apples, right? It's about the amount of risk that you're taking inside of that portfolio.
Absolutely.
And I think that goes to couple kind of with that, and what I would say the fifth mistake people make is they don't review their portfolios. They either review it too much or they don't review their portfolios enough.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to really build a portfolio that is what we would call as kind of set it and forget it. I think you have to constantly monitor your portfolio so that you have an idea of what's working and what's not working. And by the way, it's not to suggest that everything is working at all times, whether it's stocks, bonds, real estate, or what have you. I think it's in any well-built portfolio, there's typically some zigging and some zagging along the way. And I think that makes the ride a lot smoother. We happen to be in an environment where, for the most part, most things are in positive territory. But I would highlight that as we sit here today, you've got parts of the marketplace that, as you mentioned, that are up 40%, when other parts of the market are down, say 5 or 6%. That's a pretty large difference between those two. But we could fast forward 6 months from today, and some of those could reverse. And so I think it's important for people to review their portfolio on a regular basis. And by the way, also over longer periods of time, just recognize that as you get older, your tolerance for risk is likely to come down because you have less time to make up a loss. And so I think it's important to always make sure that you're monitoring that.
I think there's a couple points kind of on what you said, and you're right, and that kind of leads into the sixth mistake people are making, and that is knowing when to actually adjust their allocation. And I think specifically when you're going through and you're talking about retirement planning, a lot of people think that the way that you control risk is by adding more bonds to a portfolio. And in a rising interest rate environment, they're actually more risky. And so knowing when, and I think that's where kind of the strategy that we kind of employ, and that is dialing it up when the temperature's too cold and dialing it down when the temperature's too hot, just like you would the air conditioning, right? And knowing when to be proactive. All too often in looking at an allocation, someone take, for example, and we hear this a lot, that people go in and they review their 401k, and the way that they go through to select the investment choices is based off of what they invested in or what the performance was of their choices performed the best. And so it's kind of like driving from here to San Antonio looking in the rearview mirror. Odds of you getting there safely are not as great if the only thing you're doing is driving and looking at the rearview mirror. So you have to be proactive, have to see what's happening inside the portfolio. You have to see, and it's tough because if you had an investment that started at X percent and now that's been your best performer and now it is X plus 10%, and it's outperforming everything, your natural inclination is to put more in there, put everything in there. It always makes money.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah, I think from time to time, you don't have to necessarily rebalance, based on a calendar period. But I do think it makes some sense every once in a while just to, kind of recalibrate a portfolio, to rebalance, to get back to something that is more along the lines of the allocation that you started with. Again, recognizing that investments go up and down at various times. You have periods where where one part of the market, one sector gets really, really hot. We've certainly witnessed that with anything that has to do with artificial intelligence right now. But we've also gone through periods where maybe it was the energy space that was really, really hot. We've gone through periods where bonds were the only place to actually be,
right,
and stocks were going down. So we've seen that. We've seen periods where international was the place to be, or emerging markets. And so I think this idea of always being vigilant and being diversified is the best way to maintain wealth. It's not always, you always hear about, people who are concentrated in a particular asset class making a ton of money. You typically don't hear about somebody who is concentrated in something that went down. That's not really the type of thing that people like to talk about at cocktail parties. The best way to get there sometimes is that, is again to be the tortoise. You don't always have to be the hare.
Right. So I think that pretty well covers the 6. And just to kind of recap, the 6 are: have an emergency fund, spend less, mistakes that people make, not having an emergency fund, spending more than what you make, not treating yourself like a bill, not reviewing your portfolio, assuming that the markets always go up, and not rebalancing or reallocating or reviewing your portfolio.
You covered it.
Hey, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us on this podcast. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be back next Monday. Please make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
We'll see you next time.
All right, so let's take care of some legal stuff. As a representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. and an investment advisory representative of Sanctuary Security Advisors, LLC Securities, offered through Sanctuary Securities, member FINRA and SPIC. Advisory services offered through Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, an investment-registered investment advisor. Concenture Wealth Management is a DBA of Sanctuary Securities and Sanctuary Advisors, LLC.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as an offer or solicitation with respect to the purchase or sale of any security. The content is developed from sources believed to be accurate. No warranty, express or implied, is made regarding the accuracy, adequacy, completeness, legality, reliability, or usefulness of any information.
Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice or to predict future performance. The views expressed herein are not necessarily representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. or Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, and should not be interpreted as investment advice.
Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit against loss in periods of declining values. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Any investment discussed may not be suitable for all investors. Investors must take their own decisions based on their specific investment objectives and financial circumstances. Consult your financial professional before making any investment decision.
No part of this communication is intended to be construed as tax or legal advice. Please discuss your specific situation with a qualified tax or legal professional.